Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? You may have heard the term net neutrality, but not a lot of people understand what it means or how it may impact them. Stick around and I'll try to lay it all out for you. Okay, so I got to be a little careful with this topic because it does kind of involve politics, at least towards the end. And I don't want to get into that in this channel. So I'm going to try and talk about this topic as matter of fact as I can, even though I will admit this is a topic that's something I'm fairly passionate about, or at least that I watch closely. Net neutrality is a term that's been coined just in recent years, and it basically means open access or free access to the internet. It doesn't mean that everyone should be getting free internet access at home, but it means that communications through the internet from place to place really shouldn't be subject to any sorts of deals or politics or anything like that. This all really started, you could blame, I suppose, in some ways, or call it blaming in some ways. It really all starts with Netflix. In order to understand net neutrality, we need to quickly go through how the internet actually works. You probably pay a bill every month to an internet service provider, whether that's the phone company for DSL or cable TV or a dedicated service provider of some sort. You pay somebody some amount of money every month to get you online, whether that's your like a wired connection at home or your phone provider and you get mobile data on your smartphone, whatever. The internet is basically made up of a whole bunch of internet service providers that are connected to each other, in simplest terms. It's not just businesses that connect to each other, commercially driven ISPs. There are other large organizations that are kind of directly on the internet, things like universities and some government agencies, that sort of thing. But a lot of where the commercial traffic on the internet comes from and goes to is between private enterprise internet service providers. Obviously, in order for all of that to work, they need to cooperate with each other. They need to connect to each other. If you're a customer of one ISP and a business that you're trying to use, like their website, is a customer of another ISP, those two ISPs need to talk to each other. They set up these things called peering agreements. And basically, it's just legally is a document, a business deal that defines the conditions under which the two of them connect to each other, where they do so physically in which buildings, what physical cables they're going to use that take certain paths across, planet Earth, and then also the speed at which they connect to each other. Now that speed thing is really important. Obviously, if you're an ISP, you're going to be paying attention to your network. You're going to monitor it. You're going to see where network traffic is coming from, where it's going to, and if any of the connections in your network get saturated, they just get full, too many people are trying to push network traffic over them, then you're going to need to upgrade them, or at least figure out what's going on. Because when network connections get too busy, just like cars on a freeway, kind of fitting I'm doing this one on my commute, then it really slows down. So, the equivalent is, well, you end up with a traffic jam. And internet traffic jams suck, especially when you've got paying customers. So, for the longest time, obviously, as the internet became more and more popular and used for more and more things, those connections between ISPs, they got busier and busier, and they have had to periodically upgrade those connections. And they just kind of chalk that up to the cost of doing business. It's normal. They just invested the money in doing so, and it provided better service for all their customers. No big deal. I should note that it's not terribly expensive for ISPs to be spending some of that money on interconnects. It's a lot cheaper, at least, than pulling new cables to everybody's house, that sort of thing. Now, where Netflix gets involved is as Netflix moved from sending DVDs through the mail to doing streaming. Obviously, the streaming takes a lot of bandwidth. And more people started jumping on that platform because it was quicker and easier and more convenient and a better value and a whole host of other reasons. That, of course, is going to put pressure on ISPs' networks. They may have used to have just been, seeing people just surfing the web kind of normal, and now suddenly they've got this big burst of traffic from people wanting to watch video. And of course, Netflix, being a company, they have to buy internet service from somebody or multiple companies. And so it's, normal and common for them to not necessarily be directly connected to everybody's ISP, everybody's internet service provider. So it then, of course, is going to increase the amount of network traffic that goes through those connections between ISPs. And the ISPs got hit by that, and of course they looked at it, they'd hammered out deals to increase that bandwidth, they looked at their peering agreements. But then it seemed like at one point it went from being a technical issue to a business one. The bean counters got involved, and they found out that the majority of that increase in traffic came from people watching Netflix. And they kind of sat there and wondered, why should we be the ones paying to increase the bandwidth between us and these other ISPs when it's really due to Netflix? And so they decided, we should get Netflix to pay for this. So they hit Netflix up for some money, saying, hey, it's really your responsibility. You're the one who caused this. Why should we be paying for people to, get service from you? And never mind the fact that a lot of ISPs, in the US at least, also provide television service. What people typically were doing when they would sign up for Netflix is they'd cancel their cable subscription, typically in an effort to save money. So the ISPs, some of them at least, are kind of getting hit twice as hard here. They are suddenly seeing a spike in network traffic. They need to invest in their infrastructure to support that. And at the same time, they're seeing a reduction in revenue from people dumping cable TV. So they went after Netflix. And Netflix is like, no, you can't do that, because what are you going to do now? Suddenly charge every company out on the internet who has a presence? You're going to keep track of every single place that every, ISP customer goes, and then charge back the companies that they're going to for their share of the internet bandwidth? Netflix argued that it's a slippery slope. That, you can't just pick one culprit here and make them pay while everybody else gets away with it for free. And things kind of quieted down at that point. We saw a little bit of a resurgence when the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, a few years ago handed down some rules that they said basically promoting net neutrality, more or less saying you're not allowed to come up with deals like that, that the internet needs to be open in the sense that any network traffic should go from anywhere to anywhere, because when you start charging and putting artificial choke points into the network and that sort of stuff, it really kind of turns the internet into a have versus have not type of environment. The idea is that the internet is for everyone, it's a shared resource, and because more and more has to get done on the internet. More and more people's jobs depend on it. More and more people need to use the internet just to get through their daily lives, that it really shouldn't become something that only the people or companies willing to spend, more money should have access to. So that's where it stood for quite a while. But now it's starting to come up again, and we're starting to see it also kind of morph and take different forms. The whole argument about whether people should be allowed to pay or not, well, that came back up not too long ago, and companies actually ended up starting to cut some deals where either two other companies where there was a paid agreement, or they cut a deal that doesn't really involve any money. Like if you if an ISP also offers some sort of streaming video on demand service, they may say, well, you'll only get so much internet speed with your connection if you're just surfing to the web. But if you're using that company's video on demand service that you pay extra for, then that's going to be much faster. Or companies like Netflix or some other provider may have cut some kind of deal where they pay ISPs a certain amount of money per month. The ISPs argued, really it comes down to you should pay for what you use. They argue that their service is a lot like your electric company or your water bill in that, it costs the electric company more money to generate more electricity. So if you leave all of your lights on at home all the time versus turning them off when you don't use them, that's going to cause your electric company, a higher cost. And so they should pass that on to you. And that's generally the way that works. The thing is, with the internet, your ISP doesn't generate the network traffic. You do. They're just the conduit. The whole joke about the internet being a series of tubes. Well, in some ways it kind of is. ISPs, they're just meant, and their whole job is just to get your information to and from its destination. They're not the ones who generate that information. Yes, there is some cost to them if everybody effectively, leaves all their lights on at the same time in terms of the internet. If everybody fired up a Netflix stream and left them going 24/7, yes, they would need to invest some more in their infrastructure in order to handle that. But that's really kind of a one-time cost. Once they reach that point, it's just maintenance from there on out. It's not like they have to continually reinvest that money. They don't have to dig up the wires that run down your street every month. They just do that upgrade once and then they're set for a while until technology improves and evolves and people need more bandwidth, better speed, that sort of thing. But like I said towards the beginning of this episode, that's kind of been the way it's always been, and that's just the cost of doing business. Some may say, looking at that whole you should pay for what you use model, that could be a fair way to look at it. But here's what's really telling. At some point, an executive, and unfortunately his name is escaping me at the moment, but an executive for Comcast was interviewed and more or less admitted that net neutrality and imposing data caps, which we'll get to in a moment, and all of that isn't so much a technical issue. It's a business one. Comcast basically admitted to it. It's another revenue stream for them, and they're used to that revenue. So data caps is the other thing that I think really kind of goes hand in hand with net neutrality. We're used to seeing that with mobile data on your smartphone. You may get a bill every month for 2 gigabytes of data or 3 gigabytes of data, your plan. That's how much you're allowed to use at, quote unquote, full speed, normal speed. And then you kind of deduct from that every month. And if you go over that amount, either they make your internet connection really slow or they charge you extra. And, wireless service providers had kind of the same argument about, you should pay for what you use. And we had some bad apples that would use a ton of data and they'd make the experience bad for everybody else. And it helps us reinvest in the network and da-da-da-da-da. But now wired internet service providers are starting to get on that same game as well. Case in point, Comcast, over the past couple of years, has been slowly rolling out a bandwidth cap on their service of 1 terabyte per month. And that used to be just a few quote-unquote test markets, but now they've more or less rolled it out in almost all of their markets. And that 1 terabyte is both download and upload. And, considering it's a wired connection, and once they lay that wire in the ground, they're pretty much done with it. other than in the odd chance that something fails, that really just strikes me as being kind of a money grab. Where things get kind of scary is we had consumer protections from the US government from some of this kind of stuff for quite a while. They tried at least to keep monopolies from forming, to keep too much anti-consumer behavior from happening. And now with the current government administration, at least early 2017, the new FCC commissioner, it sounds like that a lot of those protections are going to get rolled back. The people put in charge in the government are not in favor of maintaining those. They basically want to back away from that and let the free market decide or something. I don't know. This is where things get political, and I don't want to get too far into it. But let's just say consumer protections that were in place are now, or potentially will, disappear. This will start to affect people because inevitably I suspect those data caps are going to continue to be lowered as time goes on, and as ISPs see a decline in other more profitable avenues for revenue like cable TV. If they can't come up with their own service to compete with Netflix and Hulu and other streaming media, then they're simply going to try and choke them out and get people to move back to their more traditional platform. That's the way I see things going. It's already impacted me in that now I'm much more reliant on local services, storage, that sort of thing. I had plans to try and back up all of my data to the cloud because that makes a lot of sense. Off-site backup of your data is much safer than keeping it on a hard drive in your house. What if your house burns down? But now that we've got things like data caps, it's not feasible to do that because I would exceed that every month. And so, now I've got to come up with alternate solutions. And I think, for the time being, not too many people are affected by this. But as time goes on, if things remain unchecked, I think it will start to affect people and how they approach using the internet. They're going to have to be more conservative with what they do instead of the internet just being this always on, free for all, just go out there and stream to your heart's content type of thing like we have now. But anyway, I hope this tried to explain net neutrality. I did the best I could while not getting too soapboxy. I'm always curious as to your thoughts. Where do you think things are going to go? Has it affected you already? Or are you lucky and you happen to live in a place or a country where this really isn't a factor? I'm also, of course, curious as to suggestions for future topics, feedback on this one. Leave all of your thoughts and comments down in the comment section below. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.